This lecture is an introduction to the concept of promoting a pawn in the endgame. In a position like this, if you have not played the endgame very much in chess, you might wonder how this game might end. And right now it's white to move, and for those that don't know, the endgame is the final phase of chess, of the game in chess. It's when there's very few pieces left on the board. And important strategy in the endgame is to bring a pawn to the other side of the board to get another queen as a reward. And in this position, I just wanted to go through how white will win this game. And this is something you should always think about when you're playing the endgame, is if you can use this idea of promoting a pawn. So white will play the king towards the pawns. Black's going this way. And white's going to capture these pawns and then promote this pawn to the other side of the board. And notice how this king is very far away. In the endgame, you want the king to be an active piece because it's not going to be attacked as easily because there's less pieces on the board. If you have a king that's in the center of the board or very active, like this king right here, you have a better chance of winning. So the king takes the first pawn because it protects the second pawn. King takes the second pawn. And now this is important. The king goes here to block the other king from trying to advance in any of these three squares. And so now the pawn has free reign to go to the queening square. Now this is a good move because the king was possibly thinking in this position trying to step in this way. So let's say the pawn pushed. Actually, in this position it doesn't work because the king doesn't get there in time. So either one. So either one works. You could play this if you just wanted to be sure, but this is better. And now the pawn pushes again. You always want to try to visualize it out and see the whole thing out in your head before you play it out in the game. But here the king cannot go here, so the king must retreat. And now in this position, this is queen and king versus king. And there's another chess lecture. It's either that you should watch to be able to confidently win this position. But you should know, if you don't know how to win this position, that this position is, if white plays correctly, it's always a win for white, because white can force checkmate with the queen and king versus the king. So just to go back, the strategy was to capture the pawns and promote a pawn. So I'm going to go through another example of pawn promotion. In this position, I'm going to go through the principle of pawn promotion, and it is a little different because there's bishops on the board, and this is important to understand that this position is going to be a winning game for black, and black is going to do the same thing. This pawn right here, because there are no pawns blocking it or that could interfere with its advance down the G file, right here, this pawn is called a passed pawn. So a pawn that is not going to be interfered with any pawns when it's trying to promote to the other side is called a passed pawn. So passed pawns are more valuable than regular pawns because they can turn into queens more easily. So in this position, it's white's turn. They can go here, and now black will start to push the pawn, and now the king will go here and try to try to block the pawn, but now a good move would be to move the king here and control some of the squares that the pawn will be advancing on. And so now white may try this move, bishop here, and now black will play check. And now what's going to happen is that this pawn's going to eventually get to this square right here, and then the bishop will be forced to capture the pawn because it'll be a queen, and it will be a more valuable piece. So the bishop will sacrifice it for itself for the pawn, which is turned into a queen. And then what black will do is black will use these pawns over here and use their bishop, their extra piece, to force white to give up one or two of these pawns, and then we'll promote a pawn to the other side of the board. So that's black's plan for winning, and it may seem like really complicated, like there's so much going on, but just take it step by step and you'll understand what the plan is. And now an important thing to point out is if these pawns on the A and B files right here, if they were not here, this game would be a draw because it would not be possible for black to promote the pawn without the bishop capturing it, and then you would have a situation in which it would just be a black bishop and a king versus a black bishop and a black king versus a white king. So just to repeat that, if the four pawns were on the left side of the board were gone, then this game would be a tie because this bishop would capture this pawn. The white bishop would capture the black pawn, and black would not be able to have enough to checkmate white because black would only have a bishop. And just so you know, one bishop versus one bishop and king versus a king cannot checkmate, and one knight versus a king cannot. One knight and a king versus a king cannot checkmate, and also two knights versus a king cannot force checkmate. So like a king and two knights versus a king cannot force checkmate. Okay, so you don't worry about memorizing that. Just try to understand the main points, and that will help you most of all. Okay, so now it's check. So white's going to move here, and now black is going to keep pushing the pawn. White will move the bishop because they're not ready to sacrifice it yet. They think maybe, if maybe black could make a mistake. For example, if black were to play here, it might not be as easy to win after the king comes here. And if black is really not playing that well and they play here, it's going to be an even harder game to win. So, even when you're losing, you want to give your opponent a hard time and don't make the win easy for them. Okay, so now this pawn advances again, and it is not a threat to promote just yet because the bishop would capture it, but black is going to be moving their king here, and that is the plan. So now let's say the king comes here. Now once again, if the pawn were to promote, the king would capture it. So black will play this move, king here, and now black is threatening to queen the pawn because it will be protected by the king, so the king could not capture it. And so now white must get out of the way so their bishop can capture the pawn. And now after queen, the bishop will take the queen. Now let's say they didn't and they played here. This is going to be a much easier game to win because black will be able to get checkmate by just bringing their bishop here and doing something like this, bringing their queen in. They won't even need to capture these pawns because they already have a queen, which is sufficient chess power to win the game. So bishop takes queen, king takes bishop. And now I'm just going to give you an example of how the game could progress, and how how black is going to win white's pawns. So now let's see. I just want to go back. I think a better move would probably be here. And now white will try to trade. Takes. But now after this move, this is just one possible way the game could go out. And I'm not trying to make the most. If you studied this, you might find that there could be better moves for white, but I'm just trying to give a general idea of how this game will be decided if you've never seen this type of endgame before. So let's say the king plays here. Now an important move is to defend the pawn, because if you lose the pawn, then the game will be over. In terms of black won't be able to win. So now the king moves again, and now finally this king is coming in. And now after pawn push, now we have an important moment where black kind of has to just waste a tempo or waste a move, and they'll be able to win the pawn, because they see if it were white's turn, white would have to step away from the pawn, in which white is currently defending. White can't move to the a5 square right here because this pawn will capture it. So now if just playing king to b4 and the king is forced to step away, the king still can't capture because of this bishop. And after here, now we can see we're getting to the type of endgame which we saw in the first part of this lecture, where white or where one side has a pawn and is not going to have much trouble bringing it to the other side of the board and getting a queen. So this was just an example of how the game could progress. We went through about 20 moves from the starting position here, and just important to understand the idea of promoting a pawn to the other side of the board, and how you can use that to win some of your opponent's material, and how you can use that material advantage to win the game.